Huge moves again in gold and silver. This all has to be coming to an end, right? No way they could double in price again. Well, not so fast. So we have new all-time highs for gold and silver again. Gold above $4,700, silver above $95, and at this point, it's hard to even speculate how high they could go. Well, the real question is whether all the catalysts for the prices are already known. And if they are, have we already seen the majority of the run? Now, I just spoke with Lior Gantz from Wealth Research Group, and he says there are a few things coming that really could change the way gold and silver are priced entirely.
And that's the reason that I think gold is going to go far higher also from here.
And he goes on to give two different cases that would lead to a new revaluation for silver.
But the two things that can happen, and silver can actually double because of them, are one.
Okay, Lior, let's get some context out first. You've been on the show before. People know you. You've been bullish on gold and silver for a long time. And some of the very specific things that you've been talking about, dollar dependence, trade imbalances, those are now showing up in the price. And they're pushing metals to new highs. So I think what we want to know now is pretty simple. Where do we go from here?
Let's separate gold and silver for a second. Silver has had an incredible move. And I think that the move has redefined silver for good. Because if we look back and understand what just happened, we need to realize that it started with the 15th of August 1971 that broke the dollar window, the gold window, basically the 35 to 1. Silver went from $1.92 to 50 during the 70s, but it also did many other important things that created what we're seeing right now. For one, it stopped being monetized by governments. In other words, the biggest buyer of silver, which was governments and central banks, started to actually liquidate their holdings. And that brought a lot of supply to the market. At the same time, prices started to come down because of the U.S. government and what it was doing to the Hunt brothers following the squeeze. At one point, they warehoused a third of all the stockpiles in America. So they really had something that cannot be achieved today. And then with the dissolved Soviet Union, you had another huge supplier of silver to the market. The price came down so much that by the late 90s, even Warren Buffett bought silver on the backs of the idea that, hey, this is so cheap, it's even below the production, and now silver is becoming an industrial metal. So the price came down so much that the precious metals aspect of it was irrelevant and stopped being relevant for governments and central banks, and the industrial uses, being that it's such a great conductor, took hold. And then you saw the 2000s where the Chinese were building their economy, and that really what drove the bull market of the 2000s. And after the reshoring up and the bailouts, silver went on a retail mania. But what you just saw is this culmination of silver going down so much during the 2010s and below its production cost, having thousands of new uses, and then it's also demonetized. So the fear that what China just did with rare earths could come to silver, and then it coming to fruition with export controls, brought back industrial companies saying, well, heck, we care about silver in a matter that is existential to our business. We cannot produce our products without silver. If they're going to put export controls, we are able to pay much more for our silver. And so this run up is very different than 2011 because this is not retail buying. This is industrials buying. That is what drove silver up. Silver bottomed after Liberation Day, and now it's a new price. It's a new price mechanism, and it's not going back to those levels that were pre what we saw. So that is a major shift for silver. Major.
Okay, that's silver. How about gold?
Gold has now become the biggest reserve currency or the biggest reserve asset in the world for the first time since 1996. I think that transition going away from the dollar and going into gold will continue. The main reason for that is because there's the banking framework for that with tier one assets by central banks. And two, I think and this is the big reason, and this is the reason that I think gold is going to go far higher also from here. The US dollar has ceased to be the main way that governments transact. It will start to come down more and more because what Trump is doing, what the Trump administration is doing, and what the new Fed chair is doing is readjusting the dollar to fit the needs of the U.S. government and not the needs of globalization. And that those are very different needs. The U.S. wants to be competitive; they need a weak dollar, whereas as the reserve currency of the world, the central banks wanted a very strong dollar, and they were also very much aligned with other central banks. In other words, they were talking to each other all the time about how they should buy and sell foreign currencies among them, among the central banks, to keep the dollar at a certain level. This is going away. The central bank of the United States, the Fed, will work much more in unison with the Treasury after June than with other central banks. And that is another major change that I'm predicting.
Yeah, new Fed chair. I was going to ask about that. So we're talking about June here. What does that change?
First of all, we are in a revolution. What you saw with silver with China is basically their way of using leverage, just like the U.S. uses tariffs. You have the biggest economy, biggest military, most robust economic force in the world, and that market is the premium market of the world. It's 5% of the world's people, even 4% of the world's people, but it generates the most amount of economic activity. That is the premium market by definition. And what Trump is saying is, you should pay us in order to play in this market. And that is how we're going to create revenue. Instead of taxing our own citizens for maintaining this amazing market, we will tax you for entering this market. And we will be in charge of maintaining it. The Chinese are saying, well, heck, in the last 40 years, we have built the world's biggest manufacturing hub. So we will use our manufacturing chokeholds to create leverage where we need it. And I think that that has already happened with silver. So the next question for silver is what drives it higher from here? And that I think has to do with your first question. To me, there are only two things that can really jolt the price of silver a lot higher. Otherwise, I do think that this was the bigger part of the move. But the two things that can happen and silver can actually double because of them are one, if one government, and it doesn't have to be a big one, remonetizes silver, that is a huge deal. Okay? And it could be a Latin American country, it could be an African country, it doesn't have to be a powerhouse country. It could be one country that produces a lot of silver and has problems with inflation, with currency, and just wants to remonetize silver. That is a huge deal for silver. Okay. In fact, just on the backs of that, the price of silver can double because if it creates a situation where its neighboring countries will want to do the same, or other countries that feel the same way and just are looking for the first player to do that, then that is really important. But otherwise, I do think that a new Fed chair will actually be bullish for the dollar. Right now, the dollar is weak because the Fed and the government are fighting. Once the Fed and the government stop fighting and work more in unison, I think you'll see in the back half of this year that the dollar stabilizes. Right now, the dollar is very hated. It's very easy to hate on the dollar. It's a very crowded trade, and I think that will turn around actually and be very much a contrarian idea in the back half of the year.
Okay, stronger dollar, at least temporarily, that would be bad for gold and silver.
I think so. In the immediate term, after the new Fed chair is appointed, I think that this will stabilize the dollar. On the months after, or maybe even the 2 months preceding, like April and May, once this is a sure thing, once the nomination is in public and the new Fed chair starts taking interviews, you'll see a lot of certainty brought to the market because now you'll know more about where interest rates are going, where the government sees the dollar, etc., etc.
Okay, you had a second thing that you thought could revalue silver.
Once GDP starts to print, uh, 4, 5%, which is what's coming to the United States, which is what's coming this year. I think that you're going to start hearing the new Fed chair, explain that growth does not equal inflation. And that is a misconception that has been debunked. And therefore, we are not going to stop economic growth that can help the American people unless there's real inflation coming. If we can grow in productivity and actually have real growth without inflation, we're not going to raise interest rates. And I think that is the biggest change coming to the market that's unappreciated. And that obviously is very important for silver, because if silver is going to be part of the industrial demand that's coming in the United States, then its price can certainly go up to the triple digits. It is estimated that only at 120, 125 per ounce, it starts to make sense for CFOs, for chief financial officers of industrial companies, to look at replacements for silver as a conductor. So you still have a lot of upside.
Yeah, destroyed demand. I've seen that before. $123, switch to copper, switch to graphene. Interesting analysis. I think it makes sense.
I put together two important special reports on this matter. One is at wealthresearchgroup.com/2026 silver or 2026 silver. That gives you my entire framework for silver in 2026. And I think that is really important. The second one is, I don't think that the market still understands what promises made, promises kept means, and therefore it underappreciates Trump's ability to get things done. You can see that with Europe, for example, who is just astonished by Trump. And if you go to wealthresearchgroup.com/EU, I think you will really understand the rift that's happening between America and the old continent. And that plays into what I'm about to say. When Trump was doing Liberation Day, April 2nd, 2025, he told the markets reciprocal tariffs are coming. He told the markets that a million times. Analysts could have called the White House, could have called Howard Lutnick, could have called Scott Bessent, Karen Levitt. They could have asked, what does this entail? Tell us more about the plan. No one took it seriously. And on April 2nd, when it was announced, it was like a big shock. The market took a pummeling like in COVID, like an unheard of event, but it was so well communicated. I think the same is true here. The market just does not believe that a revolution at the Fed is coming. And once it starts believing it, that will really make silver soar. So I think in the months leading up to the Fed nomination, April, May, that assurance about what the Fed is about the Fed's dollar policy, that's going to help the dollar meet in the immediate term. Once the revolution starts, I think you're going to see another re-rating event for silver.
Okay, just out of curiosity, do you think we'll ever see silver below 50 again?
I personally don't. I think that this was a re-rating event, and I think we are just in a new world order.
So you're not waiting for the music to stop. You're not looking for a chance to swap out of silver.
I don't believe in that. I believe that whatever you buy is yours. You pass it on to the next generation. It's money, so it will always be money until humanity does not view it as money. I don't think that time is coming anytime soon, and therefore the only thing I do is just continue to buy more of it. So no, I'm not going back in time.
All right, all right. Well, hey, Lior, thank you. Always appreciate your time here. Appreciate your coming out, giving us your take on everything going on.
Thank you.
Okay, let's call it good there. Again, wealthresearchgroup.com. You can find a lot of stuff from Lior if you want it. Otherwise, hit up the comments. Let us know what you're up to. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit the like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.